optimization is not only about performance, it is also about the developer experience. Because in the end, we need to turn into reality the crazy ideas that marketing team has. And the only way to do that is sometimes by having a good experience, like being able to deliver fast, but also delivering in a way that is reliable.
Welcome to another episode of the Ecommerce Toolbox Expert's Perspective. Joining us today, we have Gus from Baerskin Tactical, who's the CTO. Welcome, Gus.
Hello, thank you for having me here today.
Awesome. Well, very excited to chat with you today. Well, I always like to learn a bit more about the guest when we start off. So maybe walk us through your career journey and how you ended up as the CTO of Baerskin Tactical.
Yes, so maybe the longer story version is I started in advertising and I worked in a media company. I was the only person that could maintain websites. And at some point, I started doing some gigs for a few agencies, ended up with my own agency. And after a while, economy was down. That was in Brazil. I'm originally from Brazil. That's the mixed up accent that you might see with other languages in the middle. After a few years, I ended up as a co-founder of a startup. Didn't go very well, but ended up abroad, ended up in Sweden. And that's when I ended up as a CTO, co-founder of another e-commerce company, which we are doing a lot of integrations, trying to build a marketplace. And after a few years, ended up here in the UK where I became the CTO of Baerskin. So long story short is I always been a programmer. Actually being raised with computers at home, like my dad is a programmer as well. So I learned from early age. I would say I don't remember not having a computer at home. So I ended up using that skills at advertising, had my own agency, and then became an expert at one specific field over the years. That is the very short version of everything that happened.
Very cool. And I know that as the team was doing a bit of research, it looks like you led a few different replatformings. You guys were historically on off-the-shelf platforms. You pivoted the business towards mock style, fully composable stack. Yeah, maybe talk to us a bit about some of the limitations and some of the reasons why you went from kind of off-the-shelf monolith to more of a mock style architecture.
So there are three parts to this story, three different, completely sometimes unrelated. The first one is in the previous startup that I mentioned in Sweden, we are already building things on microservices for scalability and making sure things were modular. So that was before Mac even became a word. So it just felt right, the right way of doing things, making things that are isolated in microservices, detached, front end with headless, etc. So when I joined in at DivBrands at the time, which is now Baerskin pretty much, there was an attempt by the previous engineering team to migrate out of a monolith system and just to Shopify. So we had both systems going in. And when I say a monolith, it's not a monolith. It's more like a spawn of Satan kind of stuff, because it was a single PHP file that one guy in India know how to maintain. And whenever we had to fix anything, would be pretty much like a trial and error to delete. Yeah, but the guy that was programming that was also doing that on Notepad. So it was absolutely not nuts. Like the system was chaos. At some point, we were trying to migrate to Shopify, but the nuances of businesses didn't allow for that, like multi-currency, multi-language, multi-markets, especially in 2021. I mean, they evolved a long way up from there. So in the end, we decided to replatform to another tool, which is I'm not going to name them because I don't like badmouth any companies in here, and it's a terrible company. But it didn't work out. We spent 6 months building the entire thing. When we went live, they promised very good SLA, and it was down for like ages. I think the amount of money that we lost in revenue in the first week would supersede what we would pay them in a yearly plan. It was terrible. We tried to fix for a while, didn't work. So we decided, okay, well, let's do what we call the ghosting project, which we started whatever we could reverse engineer it in our own way, fixing those things. We managed. So we ended up building our own system in 3 months. And we jumped ship from that platform. So that's how we ended up with replatforming, because in the end, that was the easiest way and the shortest path, because 3 months, we could either build that, or if you go for an enterprise software, there will be enough time just to scope the project and go in endless sales calls. We didn't have time for that. We were draining money. We're leaking.
Well, so you think because of because you guys had to go multi-country, multi-language, and there was a lot of complexity of mainly the Baerskin business, you guys had to adopt more of a composable stack?
I think we adopted Composable mostly for the flexibility as well. Flexibility, speed. In the end, it was easy for us to rebuild that back-end part of the business because in the end, we were doing headless, and I always do headless for performance, try to maintain separation of concerns. It makes it easy to maintain, that makes easy to debug. It's less, if something goes wrong, that is one piece of the system that is off. And the big validation came after a month. We were in our completely new homebrew system. We're doing at the time we had only 4 people in the team, so it was a super short team building a multi-language, multi-market platform, e-commerce platform system. And at some point in one of those maintenances, we forgot to turn on the database again. We just forgot that and left it overnight. And the good thing is because we made things modular, composable, and even event-driven, when we figure out the problem in the morning and the alarm's going on, we turn that on. But because of all the pipelines and the way we built stuff, we didn't lose any sales. The sales continue to come in. The only real damage was customers didn't get their confirmation emails, the orders didn't come in the database, the orders didn't get dispatched, but they did eventually with a big delay.
Cool. That's very cool. And I realize your team is managing currently over 40 different microservices. How do you look at build by partner when it comes to what do you build, right? What do you buy? Or I guess buy and partner is probably the same in this context, but yeah, how do you look at that as a technical executive?
I think especially in the Pro environment business, the margins are tight, so you need to be very cost conscious. That is one thing that always drive the decisions. It's not only about cost; it's also about like productivity, how much that is going to be. So in the end, a lot of stuff, especially e-commerce, is not rocket science. So we end up like, okay, if we build this and something goes wrong, will we get in trouble? That is one of the questions I make, not only beside like, if you get it right, you only need to get it right once. But if a partner gets it wrong, we don't know how many times they are going to get it wrong. So sometimes we see also building as an investment, and we ended up building a lot of stuff. Of course, that first question, can we get in trouble? There are things we're never going to build, like payment system, things related to compliance, all those things that, better leave to the experts, leave it there. But that is pretty much the overarching idea on top of that. Sometimes, of course, we prefer to build or customize something and just use the bare bones. Also for a strategic advantage. Sometimes you want to build something that is completely different. One good example is our own checkout flow. We build in a way that is super fast to confirm and send the customer the confirmation, even though we are processing stuff asynchronously, because once we know that the payment is going to go through, don't need to wait the entire flow to validate and capture, etc. Just say, if it's good, send them to the next page and let them go. That reduces our checkout time from 32 seconds to 2 seconds. So it's super fast, even though at that point, most people don't optimize, but the customer is happier, right?
Well, and obviously you guys operate a global business. So talk to us a bit about how you've managed localization, TAC, fraud. There's different payment gateways, typically in different countries, right? Like Netherlands is very big on, I forget the name of the company, but you basically can use your debit card to pay. But if you go to France or if you go to the UK, it's completely different. Like how have you guys thought about managing your checkout in a composable way so that you can optimize conversion for each different VO?
That specific part of the business, we are very lucky that we got some big help from our friends at Google. Google has we work in partnership with them, so they help us a lot navigate those areas, optimize it a lot. In the end, we also use a lot of different payment providers, see what they have available. So instead of trying to connect with IDEO in Netherlands, as you mentioned, or so forth in Germany, this kind of stuff, the bare bones credit card, see what is available on the payment providers we use. So some things are already out of the box available on Stripe, Adyen. We orchestrate payments. So we see what is available, test it out. In the end, offering a lot of solutions is not exactly the answer. We figure out that if you try to keep concise and clean, sometimes it even converts better. So we test a lot of those options. So we came a long way across by offering at some point 10 different payment options to now like 4 or 5 focus only on cards and what you call like core APMs.
Very cool. And maybe talk to us a bit about which front-end framework you decided to, you mentioned headless, but which front-end frameworks are you thinking about? I know there was a lot of people that had a lot of opinions on React over the last couple of years, and Netflix famously said that they moved everything off of React back to vanilla JavaScript. Maybe talk to us a bit about like the front-end framework that you're thinking of using or that you used and why.
I mean, if I could, I would build everything in vanilla JS, super efficient, etc. But we use Next.js when we use React. There are a few reasons of that. And it's not the most you can always optimize further, but I think optimization is not only about performance, it's also about the developer experience. Because in the end, we need to turn into reality the crazy ideas that marketing team has. And the only way to do that is by having a good experience, like being able to deliver fast, but also deliver in a way that is reliable. Sometimes using something out of the box just to test and validate. So React is a great ecosystem for that. So that is why we use it. And sometimes we even rebuild a lot of times the same thing over and over again as we're iterating, we are improving, we are making it more efficient. Good example is at some point, most of our ideas and things we want to test, we use out of the box or even libraries that does something. And then we try to optimize, like, can we build this in-house? Can we redo that? So we're always doing this approach of revisiting our decisions because we have a culture of a lot of experimentation. So we try to build things fast, validate the idea, and move on to the next thing. We need to experiment a lot and test to figure out what it works. And it's the ever-shifting context of e-commerce. The world is changing fast. You need to also follow that pace.
That makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned a few times now a culture of experimentation. And obviously tech consistently changes. ChatGPT recently released that they want to enable shopping. And I don't know if you guys are seeing traffic come through ChatGPT or other LLMs, but we're actually starting to see it on for our company, which is very interesting because we haven't even thought about optimization. But I guess where I'm going with this is an issue that the marketing and tech and data team always seems to have in every business I speak to is data integrity, because two people could export the data to a spreadsheet, run it, and they might come to different conclusions. Maybe talk to us a bit about how you've kept your teams aligned around clean, reliable data so that when they go to run tests, they're optimizing for success. Because like you mentioned, most experiments fail at the end of the day. But if you're starting with the wrong data set, you're probably going to have a higher failure rate. So yeah, maybe talk to us a bit about that.
Our data team does some miracles to making sure data is consistent, and we actually working a lot with them. Like sometimes you push something quickly to production, and then you figure out, oopsie, I forgot this, or there is some inconsistency. So we're always revisiting, fixing that, trying to backfill anything that is wrong. And then the data team needs to both keep an eye on the quality, and we work to that. The data team is part of my team, but is a sub team that mostly works in this fine line between our team and the marketing team, because in the end they need to understand the needs. But it's a lot of collaboration and cooperation on that, making sure we are all on the same page.
Makes sense. Do you have any examples in mind where marketing team came up with something that was really crazy that pushed your team, but ended up paying off from like a ROAS or return on investment standpoint?
There is a lot of those. To be honest, I would really love to talk about one of the things we are actually developing now that we're planning to push it live, but I can't yet. Maybe in a follow-up we can say how that is going to plan out, because that is a crazy project we're working on. But in reality is most of the times our checkouts, different ways of selling. I think the one that is, we would say, it's almost like it's a love and hate relationship is the bundles. We started bundles as a just a temporary solution where you sell like two items together as a pack of one, like packs, and we just tried it out. It working so well that it became now most. If you go to our landing pages on our websites, you see most of the stuff are now bundles, and that was a huge headache for our team for a long time because there was a completely different way of selling. So we just put something together, two and two, started selling like, oh my God. And then we had all crazy sort of data inconsistencies like, oh, we don't know, we didn't say what customer selection was. Did they order Excel or green? And then we had to infer from events like, oh, actually the last selection was this. Like that is actually what the customer figured out. So now it's very stable, but it took like 3 or 4 months as this we saw this thing growing, like we catching up and like, oh God, this experiment became. I think that is one of the things. Like sometimes those quick fixes, when you see, yeah, that's another experiment that's not going to work. Let's just put a temporary fix. The temporary fix becomes permanent, and you don't know.
I love that. I love that. And obviously, as a CTO, you have to think about AI. Maybe talk to us a bit about how you're thinking about AI. So just maybe to frame it, there's kind of two different topics we could take. There's number one, how to use AI on your web properties to drive conversion. And then there's like how to use AI internally for internal tooling to drive productivity. Maybe you could take either side of the fork, but I'm curious to understand how you're thinking about it.
I would say I don't think a lot of how to use it. I'm thinking I'm a power user by now, to the point that I'm pushing code to production without touching the code, which is absolutely crazy. Yesterday, I managed to connect to Linear, which is the tool we use for tracking. Told the AI pick up the most prioritized item from the list. It started doing it. All good. Push a pull request. The team reviewed. An AI code review actually did a more thorough review, but didn't find anything in this case, and we push. I think that we are using data heavily. We are creating a culture to use that because we are a small team, so whatever we can find tools to make us work better. So I'm dedicating a lot of time in the internal tooling on that and trying to expand that to other teams. But that's one. The optimization on the website, that is something that I would call, I'm not thinking a lot on that because I think that is, the work is going to do it by itself because in the end it's trying to mimic users. But when you're thinking about optimizing for machines, you're also optimizing for SEO, for accessibility, for bots. We are seeing that traffic, as you mentioned, we're seeing a lot of those. I'm more concerned about the ones that are trying to mimic humans that they don't say you are a bot, and there is a lot of those. But I think the work is, you need to be aware, but it's not my core priority to think about that in the sense that it is changing the shift, it's changing the landscape, but we just need to be aware and continue to do what you do it, which is making sure that the pages are optimal, they're accessible, they're fast. Because I think that in the end, that those things are going to pay off. And of course, you can think a lot of AI without thinking about the humans, and the humans using AI, that is something that is not going to change in the end, right?
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I mean, that sounds pretty advanced from an internal tooling standpoint. I speak with a lot of executives, and I think they ideally want to get to that state. So it's really cool. It sounds like you guys are ready there. Do you have any advice for people that might be listening that are maybe stuck on a legacy tech stack? They're afraid to replatform or kind of take it in-house and take control of their own destiny. Yeah, maybe talk us through how you've thought about it historically.
I've been seeing more and more companies not only getting out of the monolith, but also building in-house. And I think, especially now with tooling, AI tooling making super productive, it's becoming easier, to be honest. It's becoming easier and it becomes less scary. I would say the first thing is don't be scared. Second thing is, you're going to commit mistakes. You're going to commit a lot of mistakes. and accommodate for those mistakes and make sure they're contained. I think the biggest error, and I see on companies, especially any big projects, is try to grab everything and do a big turnkey event. That is never going to work. And by the time you finish a 2 or 3 year migration project, whatever you get to is already outdated. And if that was the reality 3 years ago, as you mentioned with AI, etc., the word in 1 year, that is definitely going to be very different from whatever you build. So I would say take baby steps and try to replace parts of the system progressively, try to see where would drive more value, get small wins. And those small wins will motivate the team to move forward. But also those small losses, we learn how to not commit mistakes. So it's a balance like, okay, this is critical system. If I move this, I'll actually have a lot of progress that will make a huge difference in my business. But also, let me do this small thing here so I learn what can go wrong so I don't cause a problem. So let's say maybe start with the cart. I'll test both of them, but don't start with the checkout. Leave the checkout for when you feel more confident as well. But there is no perfect, and that is most projects fail because it's fear of doing something wrong, and it's not learning from the mistakes. Would say that, and that's most are cultural things because technically it's viable, it's feasible. You see, we did it with a small team of 4 at the time. A lot of companies do with small teams. You see a lot of like AI companies that are run by 1 or 2 people. So it's getting even easier. So and the more the time passes, the more you can see materials, case studies, and other information about people that manage to do it.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much for spending the time with us, Gus. Congrats on all the success. We really, really appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you.
The Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives is brought to you by Noibu. To find out more about Noibu and how we can help you debug your e-commerce site and rocket your revenue, visit www.noibu.com. That's Noibu.com. And then make sure to search for the Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Noibu, thanks for listening.